What had she done this time? Was the first thought that popped into my head when I saw the half-eaten bear carcass drooping from the roof of my barn. The sun had barely come up, and already I had to get my ladder and clean up yet another bloody mess. Yes, I was grumpy. Blood is generally hard to scrub, so I was just crossing my fingers that none of it had leaked through the roof of my barn and down onto my tractor. Getting the bear down proved to be a bit more troublesome than I had initially thought. It seems prodding it with a rake didn't quite do the trick, so I had to resort to climbing up there and kicking the thing until it slowly sort of slid down, landing on the ground with a rather disgusting combination of a splash and a thump. A schlump, I guess. I was about halfway down the ladder when I saw the blue lights of the cruiser coming up the hill. Damn it! They kept showing up sooner and sooner. It was like they were expecting there to be a corpse here at any given time. I gracefully skipped the last 4 steps of the ladder, landing so elegantly, ass first, atop the fluffy comfort of a decomposing bear. Please, don't let it be colic-er, I repeated over and over and over again in my mind like a mantra. I simply could not stand the Stan. I smiled and let out a sigh of relief once I realized it wasn't Stan. Turns out it was the sheriff himself, old Richard Zucker. He raised his arm and tipped his hat simultaneously, no mean feat, and slowly wandered towards me, looking around the place suspiciously. "Dick Zucker," I smiled. "How the hell are you?" The sheriff sighed and lowered his head.
"I wish you'd just call me Richard, or Sheriff."
"Nah," I said. "Way too formal. We're friends, right?"
"I suppose, but I'm afraid I'm here on duty. Got quite a few weird calls this morning."
He sighed. "Weird is my middle name, Sheriff," I lied. "It's weird, actually. How can I assist?" He pointed to the mangled bear next to the barn.
"That's how. By my accounts, we've got 9 more just like it."
"The bear?" I asked curiously. "Don't tell me they were all found like that."
"Uh-huh. Ripped to pieces,"
he said solemnly.
"Hanging from roofs all over the place."
I smiled. That could only mean it wasn't my daughter. It wasn't Rosalind. No way she'd have the energy to maul that many bears in one night. 3, 4 tops, but 10? Not a chance.
"What in Sam Hill's hell are you smiling for?"
the sheriff asked.
"This is serious business. You can't go around killing bears. How do you go around killing bears and shredding them to pieces up on roofs?"
"My apologies, Dick," I said. "I was thinking about something else. Sorry, how can I help you, though?" The sheriff tapped his nose.
"We both know you know. And we both know you know I know. And,
Yes, I get it," I said. "I know things, you know things. We both know things. So..."
Well, if anyone can help me figure this out, it's you."
He was right about that part. The law around here wasn't particularly big on solving cases, mostly because there never really were any. Well, That's a lie. But also because they were generally lacking competence. I mean, they hired Stan, for Christ's sake. If that's not a cry for help, I don't know what is. Sure, I said. I'll help. You got a perimeter? Pattern? Sheriff Zucker looked at me like I was some sort of a ghost. But I wasn't, yet. I sighed deeply and motioned for him to follow me as I paced towards the house. Wait here, I pointed to the porch. For your own protection, Rosalind can get real grumpy in the morning. I swiftly grabbed the county map from my office. It was already more or less covered by pen strokes and markings from previous endeavors. But it had to do. I could hear Rosalind rummaging around on the second floor. I just prayed she didn't wake her mother and the little one. All three of them, tired and grumpy, could really be a handful. I quickly joined the sheriff outside, and we brought the map over to his car. All right, I said. Mark down the findings on the map. The sheriff hummed discordantly as he mapped out where the bears had been found. I quietly registered what he had so incompetently failed to see. See here, I pointed to the map. All the bears were found within a mile of that location. A perfect circle around it.
Well, I'll be goddamned.
He scratched his head.
How did I not realize that sooner?
Colliker huffed.
Well, lick my canyon and string me up wet.
Because you're bloody stupid, I thought. Happens to everyone, I said. Senior moment or something.
Well then,
he said.
We better get going.
I stared at him like he was a ghost. We? I asked. You want me to come? He nodded firmly.
You know more about these things than anyone around here. Can't do it without you.
If you think I'm getting into that cruiser, you got another thing coming, I said. Remember the last time?
Well, that was just an honest mistake,
he said.
A misunderstanding.
Misunderstanding? You arrested me for murder! I waved my finger in his face angrily.
Like I said, a misunderstanding.
He lowered his head.
Anyway, the corpse liquefied overnight, all our technical evidence gone, and you got out the next day. No harm, no foul.
I sighed and kicked at nothing. Fine, I said, but you had better have me back before my wife wakes up. The sheriff opened the passenger door and nodded. I nodded back. Let's do it then. The ride didn't take long. There were no roads leading to where we were going, so we had to park down by Fletcher's Stain, a small fetid pond famous locally for inhabiting more leeches than any other pond in the county. The point on the map wasn't more than a 10-minute walk from the Stain, but we quickly came to realize we'd be stopping more often than we initially thought.
What the hell is that?
The sheriff's voice queried, high-pitched, pointing a trembling finger at the smoking crater before him. That, I said, is a moon crater. I haven't seen one in ages. The moon craters would show up from time to time. I'd never seen this many, though. The trail leading further in was littered with them. Hundreds, maybe more. No one really knows how they appear or why, but usually what follows are weeks, even months, of strange, bizarre events. Weird animal behavior, things that suddenly disappear, strange flashes at night, massive signal disturbances. I'm quite looking forward to the aftermath of these. It's bound to be spectacular.
Moon crater? It's not very deep.
The sheriff suggested.
But maybe whatever caused it also flung those bears into the air?
I shook my head. I doubt it, I said. If your bears were anything like mine, they'd been chomped on quite rigorously. The sheriff nodded thoughtfully.
I suppose so.
We walked for about 5 minutes more before we started noticing the tracks. Well, I started noticing the tracks. They were all over the place, but the sheriff was too nervous, hung up on the craters still, I'd imagine, to spot them. And I didn't want him to. I knew now what killed those bears. And it was better for everyone involved if I handled this one alone. Look, Sheriff, I said. I think you should turn back. I can handle it from here. He looked at me like I was a 10-foot-tall raven black arachnid with a human face. Wait, that didn't seem right.
What?
The sheriff stuttered, pointing over my shoulder.
What the flapping big titty hell is that?
I sighed deeply. I told you to turn back.
That's the...
He continued, staggering back in horror.
That's the goddamn Spindler!
The Spindler was a local legend, ghost story. A 10-foot-tall, raven black arachnid with a human face. None of the descriptions of it were particularly benefiting the real thing, though. Sure, she was 10 feet tall, but she didn't have 8 legs like an arachnid would, or a raven black complexion. It was really more of a deep shade of brown, if you ask me. The human face part was spot on, however, so all in all, I'd say 50% accurate. Don't move a muscle, Sheriff, I said, slowly turning around to face the old Spindler. She was upset. I could tell that much. Her long, spidery appendages were covered in blood and guts and bits of flesh, and she had a real agonizing expression on her horrid, half-human visage. Her eyes were darting around frenetically, like she had trouble focusing on anything in particular. "Calm down, Greta," I said in my most soothing voice. "It's me, Ray. You remember me?" I edged back towards the sheriff. She was towering above me, her right claw resting mere inches from my face. A swift jab and I would have been done for, cut in half, cradling my own guts. I kept backing up until I suddenly heard the very distinct sound of a gun cocking.
I'm taking it down,
he whispered.
Move away.
I'm sorry about this, Richard. You'll understand one day. With a very singularly elegant move, if I do say so myself, my elbow connected with the sheriff's nose, and he fell back screaming and cursing, bleeding profusely. I followed up my sucker punch to the face with a sucker kick to the forehead, and once I'd made sure he was still breathing, I sat down next to him, trying my very best not to move. Greta didn't seem too affected by our little rumble. She was still sort of hovering around. and I could tell that she was slowly starting to calm down. Her human face, centered on that bizarre, plumpish thorax, had lost its anguished expression, and minute by minute her senses were gradually starting to return. After about 20 minutes, she lay there motionless in her human form. Poor old Greta. I picked her up and carried her through the forest for half a mile until I heard Ezra's voice calling Greta's name a ways off into the dusky woods.
Ezra!
I shouted.
Over here!
Ezra came running through the bushes. He was flustered and sweaty, and I guess he'd been up all night looking for Greta. I could relate to that, been there quite a few times myself.
"Thank you, Ray," he said hoarsely. "She got away from me. I'm sorry."
It's okay, Ezra. I hoisted Greta into his arms. She only took out a couple of bears. I'll tell the sheriff it was some freak catapult accident or something. Ezra started crying, tears streaming down his face.
"Thank you so much, Ray. I don't know what we'd do without you here."
Oh, you'd be fine, I smiled. I have to get back to the sheriff before he wakes up. I hurried back to the sheriff, having first made sure Greta was all right. Poor old Greta. Alzheimer's. Such a terrible, twisted, screwed-up disease. She'd wander off from Ezra, her husband, every once in a while, but usually she'd show up. I'd have to be more vigilant in the future, though. Her condition was getting worse. I carried the unconscious body of the sheriff back to his car and laid him out in the back seat. I'd have some explaining to do later, but I'd think of something. I always do. It's become sort of my job. I decided to walk back to the farm. It wasn't that long of a hike, and it gave me a chance to clear out my head. I was about halfway there when I saw the horse, Miss Piggy, galloping down the hill with the pig, Gilbert, trailing behind.
Damn it, not again.
Rosalind must have let the animals out. Alternatively, she had become one of the animals. I sighed deeply, but couldn't help but to smile. It's not always easy being Farmer Ray, but it sure as hell is interesting.